Have you ever heard someone speak perfectly correct English, yet their words felt cold, as if they were reading from a machine? And have you also met a person whose English was simple, maybe even broken, but their words touched you deeply and stayed in your memory? The difference, my friend, is not grammar or vocabulary, it is emotion. Let me tell you a story. There was a young man named Arif. He had studied English for years, filling notebooks with rules, memorizing words, and repeating dialogues from textbooks. Yet whenever he spoke, people nodded politely, but forgot his words the moment they turned away. His sentences were correct, but his voice carried no life. He was like a singer hitting every note, but without music in his soul. One evening, frustrated, Arif stumbled upon a passage in a book called The Power of Words. It spoke of how words are not only sounds, they are carriers of human feeling. That night, he asked himself, what am I truly trying to say when I speak English? Am I only proving that I know the language, or am I sharing my heart? The next day, something changed. Instead of introducing himself with the usual flat tone, "My name is Arif, I am from Pakistan," he spoke as if he wanted the listener to feel his pride, his story, his identity. He lifted his voice slightly, smiled, and let warmth flow into his words. "My name is Arif, and I carry many dreams with me." Suddenly, people leaned closer. They listened. They remembered. From that moment, Arif discovered a secret. Emotion is the bridge between language and the human spirit. Even if his grammar wavered, people respected his sincerity. They connected not with the perfection of his sentences, but with the energy behind them. Over time, he realized something powerful. Fear of mistakes had been chaining his tongue. He had been speaking to avoid being wrong instead of speaking to be understood. The day he shifted from fear to feeling, his English came alive. His vocabulary grew naturally because every word he learned carried an emotion. He started telling stories instead of giving answers. If someone asked him how his day was, he didn't reply with a flat, "I'm fine." Instead, he said, "I'm fine, but a little tired because I was chasing my dream today." People smiled, laughed, and wanted to know more. He understood now that every conversation was a chance not only to practice English, but to inspire. Great leaders throughout history, whether delivering speeches, writing books, or even teaching children, did not win hearts by flawless grammar alone. They used emotion as their strongest vocabulary. Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, Malala Yousafzai, each one proved that when words are filled with passion, they rise above language barriers and echo in human memory. Arif's journey reminds us of a truth. Learning English is not only about sounding correct, it is about sounding alive. If you pour your feelings into your words, your English will no longer be a foreign tool. It will be your voice, your song, your gift to the world. So, when you speak English, do not only think of what word comes next. Think of what you want the other person to feel. Let your joy, your pain, your hope, your excitement flow through your voice. Because people may forget your grammar, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And that is the real secret. Speaking English with emotion is not just about language. It is about living, connecting, and leaving something behind in the hearts of those who listen. Imagine a child saying, "I love you," in simple words. Those 3 words might not follow any advanced grammar structure, but they carry the weight of 1,000 pages of poetry. That is the power of emotion in speech. It can make the simplest statement unforgettable. It can make a quiet voice louder than 100 shouted speeches. And when you bring that same emotion into English, your words begin to live. They stop being sounds your mouth produces and become experiences your listeners feel. If you learn English only to pass exams, your language may live on paper but die in conversation. But if you learn it to express joy, anger, hope, or even sorrow, your English begins to breathe. Emotion is not decoration. It is the soul of your words. Without it, you are only reciting lines. With it, you are telling your story. Speaking without feeling sounds empty. Think of someone reading a poem in a flat, robotic tone. The words may be beautiful on paper, but when spoken without emotion, they lose their power. The same happens in English conversations. You might form sentences that are perfectly correct, yet if your voice carries no life, People hear the sound, but not the meaning. It becomes noise instead of connection. Imagine standing in front of an audience and saying, I believe in my dream. If you say it with no passion, no rise or fall in your tone, it feels like a hollow statement. But if you let your voice show your fire, if your eyes reveal your conviction, suddenly those same words awaken the room. People lean in, not because of the vocabulary, but because of the feeling behind it. This is why many learners get frustrated. They focus only on correctness and forget to bring themselves into their words. A sentence without emotion is like a lamp without light. It exists, but it does not shine. When you speak English, let your heart enter the sound. That is when your language stops being empty and starts becoming unforgettable. Fear of mistakes holds many learners back. Think about it. How many times have you stayed silent, even when you knew the answer, just because you were afraid of saying something wrong? This fear acts like an invisible chain around your tongue. It keeps you from speaking freely, from experimenting, from discovering the beauty of your own voice in English. The truth is, mistakes are not proof of weakness. They are proof of courage. Every great speaker, every fluent person you admire, once stood where you are now, stumbling over words, mispronouncing sounds, and feeling the sting of embarrassment. But they kept speaking. They understood that mistakes are not the end of learning, they are the beginning. Imagine a child learning to walk. Each fall is not a failure, it is practice. Without those falls, there would be no steps, and without steps, no journey. In the same way, every mistake in English is a step forward. Fear tells you to stay quiet, but silence teaches you nothing. Speaking through your mistakes, however, shapes your skill and builds your strength. When you let go of fear, your English transforms. You stop speaking to avoid being wrong and start speaking to be understood. And in that moment, the language becomes yours. Not perfect, but alive, real, and growing with every word you dare to say. Confidence grows when you connect with your heart, not just your tongue. Many learners believe confidence comes only after mastering grammar, memorizing thousands of words, or speaking without hesitation. But the real spark of confidence begins the moment you speak from who you are, not only from what you know. Think of someone standing on a stage with flawless English but a trembling voice. Now imagine another person with simple words, maybe even a few errors, but speaking with energy, warmth, and belief. Who leaves a stronger impression? It is always the second, because confidence is not perfection, it is presence. When you connect your words to your feelings, your speech becomes more than language. It becomes an extension of your identity. A learner who says, I want to share my story with genuine emotion will sound more confident than someone reciting rehearsed sentences. Why? Because the listener hears honesty, not performance. Confidence is built by daring to show yourself. When your heart leads your tongue, you stop worrying about how others might judge you. You focus instead on how you can connect, inspire, and be heard. And that shift is where true confidence lives. Not in flawless sentences, but in fearless expression. Stories are remembered because they carry feelings. Think about the last time someone told you a story that stayed in your mind for days. Was it because the grammar was perfect? Was it because every sentence was polished? Or was it because the story made you feel something, hope, sadness, excitement, or even laughter? Human beings are wired to remember emotions, not structures. A powerful story told in simple English will linger longer than a speech filled with difficult words, but no heart. That is why the greatest teachers, leaders, and writers often use stories. They knew that facts may inform, but stories transform. So, when you speak English, don't just trade information. Wrap your words in emotion just like a story does. Give people something to hold on to, not just in their minds, but in their hearts. Because in the end, it is not the correctness of your story that makes it last. It is the feeling it awakens in those who hear it. English is not only words, but a way to touch people's minds and hearts. Too often, learners see the language as a set of rules, as if communication is only about arranging sentences correctly. But language is not just a tool for passing exams. It is a bridge, a channel through which you share your thoughts, dreams, and emotions with another human being. Think of how music works. A song may have lyrics, But what truly moves us is not the words on paper. It is the melody, the rhythm, the emotion carried in the singer's voice. English works the same way. You can memorize endless lists of vocabulary, but if you speak without intention, your words pass by unnoticed. When you speak with feeling, however, your voice becomes music, and your message enters directly into someone's heart. This is why two people can say the exact same phrase, yet one leaves you inspired while the other leaves you untouched. The difference is not the dictionary, it is the soul behind the words. When you treat English as more than words, you stop worrying about mistakes and start focusing on connection. Every conversation becomes a chance to touch someone's life, even in a small way. And that is when your English becomes powerful. Not because it is perfect, but because it is alive. Vulnerability makes your speech powerful. Many learners try to hide behind perfect grammar, rehearsed sentences, or memorized phrases because they are afraid of showing their true selves. But the truth is, people are not moved by perfection. They are moved by honesty. When you allow yourself to be a little vulnerable in English, when you let your real emotions show, your words suddenly gain strength. Think of a person admitting, "I am nervous, but I want to try." That simple confession, spoken with sincerity, connects more deeply than a flawless but lifeless introduction. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is a doorway to trust. It shows that you are human, that you care, and that you are willing to share your heart, not just your grammar. Great speeches and unforgettable conversations often carry a moment of vulnerability. It could be a pause, a trembling voice, or a personal story that reveals struggle. These are the moments people remember because they are real, and when something is real, it resonates. So, instead of hiding your mistakes or pretending to be perfect, dare to speak with openness. Dare to let your voice tremble if it must. Because when you allow yourself to be vulnerable in English, you give your words a rare kind of power, the power to touch others where correctness alone never can. Great speakers use emotion as their true vocabulary. If you listen closely to the voices that shaped history, you will notice something remarkable. Their power did not come from complicated sentences or advanced words. It came from the way they poured emotion into every phrase. Their voices carried fire, hope, sorrow, or determination, and that feeling was stronger than any dictionary. Think of Martin Luther King Jr. speaking about his dream, or Malala Yousafzai defending the right to education. The words themselves were simple, but the emotion behind them turned those words into movements, into echoes that still travel across time. This is proof that emotion is the greatest language of all, one that every human being understands, no matter where they are from. Learners often believe they need to master thousands of words before they can inspire others in English. But the truth is, you already have the most important vocabulary, your feelings. When you let your joy, your pain, your courage, or your passion flow into your words, people will hear more than English. They will hear you. That is the secret of great speakers. They do not just speak to inform, they speak to ignite, and you can do the same. When you stand in front of someone, remember this: the heart is the real dictionary, and emotion is the truest vocabulary you will ever need. Learning English with passion turns practice into purpose. Many learners see practice as a heavy duty, repeating words and drills without joy, as if English were just another subject to endure. But the moment you bring passion into your learning, everything changes. Practice stops being a burden and becomes an adventure. Think of someone who loves music. They don't practice guitar because they must. They play because it fills them with energy. Each mistake is not frustrating, but part of the rhythm of learning. The same is true for English. When you practice with passion, when you tie your learning to your dreams, your goals, your deepest reasons, you stop counting hours and start living in the language. Passion fuels persistence. It carries you through the times when progress feels slow. It reminds you why you began in the first place. Without passion, you may give up after a few struggles. With passion, even the hardest challenges feel meaningful, because every step brings you closer to the voice you want to have. When you love the process, English stops being just a skill to acquire and becomes a part of your identity. That is how passion transforms practice. It makes it alive, it makes it personal, and it turns every word you speak into a piece of your purpose.